Kyle Durham. He's the Commercial Sustainability Lead for FNB. Greg Cress, Accenture Sustainability Lead. And he did a quick interview this morning before coming to join us. Sandile Ntseoane, hope I got that right. SAVRALA GM. Yahya Varachhia, WesBank FNB COO. And my good friend Lisa Chi, FNB China Desk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, Reba and Prashant. And thank you to you all for joining us today. We've been very excited to have this conversation with you. And we're going to just jump straight into it because we've had our introductions. But actually, I'm going to redo the introductions because there's a lot that this panel do. So Kyle Durham, as Prashant said, he is the head of sustainability for FNB Commercial. He's really driving the charge for us to build sustainable solutions and make sure that our solutions make an impact in our clients' lives. So we lean on Kyle quite heavily. And Greg, most of you probably know him if you are interested in electrical vehicles and eMobility. He is a very key voice in the industry for South Africa, helping us to understand what does the journey look like for us, what are the things that we can lean on as we try to electrify our fleets. Then we have Sandile Ntseoane. He is the general manager for SAVRALA, which is the South African Vehicle Rental and Leasing Association for South Africa, and the focus on leasing in the EV space is quite important. And this association is a big driver of us making sure we have the data that we need to understand how we can grow the industry. Then we have Yahya Varachhia as the CEO of Fleet Management and Leasing in WesBank. He is really the driver of how do we develop our solutions, how do we make sure that not only our products but our systems, the way that we operate, will be optimal for you as our clients. And then definitely not least, we have Lisa Z. She is the head of FNB China, and a lot of the knowledge that she brings to us is invaluable in our space. She is the link to us and our partners in the China corridor, helping us provide more solutions, more learning coming from China and enabling us to grow in this space. So thank you all for joining me today. So I'll just get us started. Kyle, I'll perhaps start with you. The question I have for you is, why is the topic of new energy vehicles and sustainability gaining such critical importance in South Africa and around the world?
Yeah, Linda, I think it's always good to chat on this topic and chat about sustainability in general. It's such a big topic and it moves really, really quickly. And the anecdote is often, 2 weeks in sustainability is often 6 months everywhere else. And I feel like this eMobility topic really is probably where the fastest movement is happening at the moment. And really, I think if we just look at it as a country, and globally, 28% of the global emissions comes from the transport sector. So, it's a big topic globally. And then from South Africa's perspective, 10 to 12% of our emissions come from our transport sector. So, if we just look at this emissions picture, which I don't think tells the full story, you can clearly see it definitely bubbles under the surface. But I think for our clients sitting here, it's a big topic, and sustainability is a big topic because I think sustainability talks to operational efficiency. And as South African businesses, we need to be operationally efficient. We need to be globally competitive. And sustainability enables that. And this eMobility and NEV conversation allows these businesses to really remain cost competitive. I think in second circumstance, South African businesses are unfortunately at the whim of the global movement. We're not able to be the trendsetters that we want to be in that sense. So we've got to adapt to what the global requirements are and be competitive at a global stage. So if you're supplying into the likes of Tesco's in the UK as an example, or you're supplying into the European Union, things like their own transition pathway as a retailer, and things like the carbon border adjustment mechanism become important aspects. If you're supplying into the automotive sector in South Africa, our clients often tell us, which email do you want from this OEM in this week where they've asked me something about my sustainability. So it's certainly a big topic, and this component is really an important one just to really unlock.
Thank you for that, Carl. I think what I love about what you're saying is quite often when we think of sustainability, it seems like it's fluff around what are we going to do for the environment only. But what Carl is speaking about is it's important for us to build operational efficiencies and also maintain that competitiveness. So Lisa, I'll go over to you. Ntseoane already spoke about how China is leading the charge. What are some of the key factors that have enabled China to lead the charge? Maybe if you can take us through a bit of that.
Okay, thank you, Linda. So China starting that motor manufacturers since 1990s. So since then, is ever we've seen this as successful. So the reason for the successful, and there's a couple of the factors to contribute to that. And as we know, China started for this auto EV cars only in 1990s. In the short period of time, 30 years, how did they manage to getting so successful? As we see, there's about 131 brands operated and managed in China. So some of the brands we're already seeing here in South Africa. Today, we have some of those Chinese brands also participate in this event. And we see this BYD, Cele, and GWM, Foothold, Sunny, and all of the brands already started their journey of the EV cars. So EV journey in China only take for 30 years. So the key factors is about the government's strong support. So the government support coming from a central government as well as the local government. So when we're talking about if you want, as entrepreneur, establish EV business, they give the tax break for these electronic vehicles manufacturers, and then they're qualified. And also for the infrastructures and associated with electronic vehicles, they're also qualified for the tax break. But as individual buyers, consumers, and they also give these customers a subsidize to enable for them to converting the traditional vehicle to the EV vehicles. So that is a very, very important factors. And for the Chinese vehicle, in such a short period of time, just less than 30 years, they're developing to today. And thank you.
Thank you so much. I know you're saying 30 years is quite a short period of time, but we're sitting in a space where we're wanting rapid progression very quickly. And I guess the other end of that learning is we're not going to see a change in a year or 2 years. This is quite a journey that we must prepare ourselves for. With that being said, I think the incentives that have assisted geographies like China is not just unique to China alone. I know in America and in other European countries, a lot of the governments have supported the growth of new energy vehicles with incentives of many forms, including policies as well. So Greg, I'll go over to you. Given that South Africa has perhaps limited resources and the likelihood of incentives in the form that we've seen internationally might not be likely, does this then lead us, or should this then lead us to believe that perhaps the journey for electrifying our fleets is perhaps not for South Africa? And maybe if we expand on that, is it perhaps also not for Africa?
Absolutely not, Linda. I think we saw this incentives put in place in Europe really in response to the climate agenda, the climate change agenda, the Paris Accord that was signed. That in conjunction with the incentives to change the human behavior and the choices that they have in Europe and in China have been successful, but they've been artificial to some level. And it's actually, in some respects, created difficulties in the used car and the second-hand car market as those initial vehicles are now coming back into play. But from a South Africa perspective, I think we can look around the world and actually take the best lessons learned, and we can apply them here for what works here. And for South Africa and Africa specifically, I'd say it's all about contextual innovation. It's in response to our unique environment, our unique needs, our unique energy situation that we have to work within. And we have other levers to look at that are potentially non-fiscal. So, yes, we can obviously still try to look at the import duty scenario. We can look at the ad valorem tax scenario. Fundamentally, it comes down to two things. It's about how do we get EVs more affordable for the mass adoption that we want to see. And through that, we need to continuously educate about the benefits that sustainability brings, that the right sort of choices around new fuel alternatives can make, and the efficiencies that you can gain. It's fundamentally a better technology to drive in. If petrol engines were invented today and we had been driving electric cars for a year, we would question why we would be going to be burning stuff to actually propel transportation. So I think absolutely not. I think South Africa, we can certainly thrive, and we are thriving, and we're seeing it outside in terms of the choices that are becoming available.
Especially what you say about we have an opportunity to be innovative in the way that we apply this technology. So I'm going to stay with you for a bit again. What's some of the innovations that you've seen in South Africa in the way that, whether it be our automotive partners from an OEM perspective, bring in technology, how innovative have we been in applying that technology? And maybe what are some of the challenges that we still do face that we need to figure out as South Africa?
So I think, there's a couple of things. I think from an EV value chain perspective, we're starting to see new areas open up that we previously never saw before. So battery assembly, battery manufacturing as a value chain, we're starting to see it happening on the stationary energy storage side in response to home requirements for home batteries, but certainly that can be extended into the EV world. We're seeing the value chain around energy as a service, vehicle to grid, vehicle to load. These are all new areas that would not have been possible in any other form besides what the EV market is bringing us in terms of the battery value chain. Battery recycling is something that is an untapped market for South Africa and Africa to look at, particularly the concept called urban mining, which is being able to reclaim the critical minerals out of batteries that are 15 to 20 years old and remake new batteries. So there's this constant supply of minerals. The second layer I would say is around infrastructure. We've seen fantastic progress from the private sector, the likes of Winston and Grid Cars that are here today, that have invested early for us to be able to be where we are, to have that infrastructure. That's created new skills requirements, new job opportunities, technical skills that are needed to maintain and operate these networks, for example. We'll also see that cascading into different forms of charging spaces. We think about always stopping at a fuel station to charge, but in the future we're going to see destination charging. We're going to see chargers that are available outside of rooms like this or at conference centers. We'll see them at dealerships who need to transform to become almost charging lounges and attract customers back more than once a year, but every once a week even, to come and charge. So this is creating a ripple effect of opportunities for people to evolve and also to innovate and create new business models, which is super exciting.
I love that, Greg. And some of the new technology that's coming will be wireless charging that I think will be reaching South Africa soon as well. Looking at the international growth, the leasing companies abroad have been a key driver of the growth in electrifying of fleets. Maybe, Sandile, why is it that the leasing companies have been able to be such a driver to the conversion or to the electrification of fleets in international markets?
Thank you very much, Linda. Look, obviously, I look after two sectors, which is the leasing and the rental. But certainly, the leasing industry has taken quite a serious leap in terms of adoption. But if you look internationally, I think that has largely been driven by legislation and pushed by government. If you look at our counterparts in the UK, for instance, they're well ahead of us, in fact, when it comes to that. And it's driven by legislation. But when it comes to South Africa, obviously, it's only just recently where we finalized the green paper on EVs, for instance. And it's only now that things are starting to pick up. But certainly, on the rental side, we've seen very negligible growth in that area. In fact, as of just in June, for instance, year to date, we're looking at almost about 416 units sold nationally in South Africa, as opposed to, no, I'm talking just on the rental side, against 7,000 that's made, I think, for June year to date. So that tells you the adoption has been very, very low on the rental side. But I don't know if I've answered your question. It's just that I'm just thinking now, there's obviously a whole lot of things that are influencing our industry to move faster. And it's, you know, the rental side, for instance, falls under the tourism sector. And a large portion of our customer base is obviously the inbound, you know, customers that are coming out from overseas and around the world. And there is a demand, even though, you know, locally, one hasn't seen that, you know, a drive, but there's a demand coming from overseas as well, from our customer base. It's almost taking pretty much like, you know, the whole question of the disasters that we've seen over the years. And people didn't take those seriously, but it's the impact of climate change. Certainly, we want to see that through education that I think Greg also spoke about. Through education, we're going to see a change, and the legislation that has also just been introduced as well. Okay.
A space where we're still trying to understand the technology, and perhaps in a space like the rental industry where every cent matters, it's a matter of understanding how do we leverage the technology in that space that the business remain profitable or in fact increase their profitability. But Yahya, looking at leasing as a product on its own and the way the international markets have used leasing to enable the growth of electrical vehicles, what is it about leasing that is an enabler in this space?
Yeah, so Linda, at the end of the day, we need to almost, from a leasing perspective, have a mind shift towards unpacking and understanding the cost of ownership of the asset. I think South Africans largely wanting to have the mentality of ownership, and generally with ownership there's multiple other considerations. But understanding the total cost of ownership gives you the ability to be able to deploy a fit-for-purpose asset within your environment. Important is also your fleet usage patterns. Unpacking, you know, some of the route and the route planning within your organization would also then enable a more direct approach to understanding how these type of assets could be deployed within your environment. We're not saying that it's going to require a massive transition all at once. There's various ways and mechanisms in terms of how we can assist as leasing companies, our customers. We could pilot, we could do a staggered approach, and then ultimately we could do a full transition. But understanding the cost would determine to what level and extent you could use your EV. We're also not advocating that you transform your entire fleet to EV, but we're saying we can definitely get a good mix of EV and ICE to better optimize your cost.
I love that. And it's basically about using assets that are fit for purpose, an asset that will work for you. And what has been key is seeing a lot of entities, and some sitting here, that have gone the route of piloting the vehicles to understand how the vehicles are going to perform and how they will add values for them. But one thing that is perhaps still a question mark for South Africa, given that the technology is still so new, is with us having such little information, how do leasing companies, or how do we as participants in this space, how do we manage the residual value risk? And what are some of the things that WesBank Fleet Management and Leasing is doing to try and mitigate or try and manage this risk while we're still at such an early stage of this adoption?
Yes, Linda, I think that's probably the biggest question here on the floor, as well as out there, as I had consulted with some of our customers and clients and OEMs outside as well. And that's where the power of our relationships actually come to the fore. Yes, as a leasing entity, we are able to unpack the data around your existing fleet. We are able, through certain telematics information and data, almost convert your ICE engine data into how effective an EV vehicle could potentially be deployed into your organization. But ultimately, it also goes down to the fact that if we, through this partnership, enable ourselves to unpack the vehicle, the battery, there was discussion around the fact that there could be second life use of the battery, how we could value the battery independent of the vehicle, how we could potentially use the vehicle to second life lease, possibilities of replacing batteries after 3 or 4 years. That partnership will almost enable us to have a lot more confidence within the leasing sector, but also give clients the ability to have a lot more comfort around the fact that they're not solely taking the risk on these assets.
Thank you for that. And perhaps that speaks to what are some of the learnings that we can take from the likes of China, who are a lot further on in the journey. So Lisa, looking at China's growth, I mean, they are 30 years in. There have been some players who've been in the game for about 10 years in South Africa, but we're really only starting to see the growth and the movement now. What are some of the lessons that we can learn that can help us answer questions like the RV risk, help us answer what does this look like for us and what can we leverage on? So what are some of the learnings that we can take from the journey that China has had?
Thanks, Linda. So I think China are talking about the journey for 30 years, but you see this, the rapid growth actually is in the past of the 10 years. Why China can grow the EV vehicles so quickly? I think there's a very important part, which is infrastructures, because every single thing started from government policy, and they not only to encourage the EV cars and the manufacturers, but they do the whole set to grow together, like infrastructures, and as well as that China is a large data-driven country, and causing the EV cars are growing so rapidly. So I see that all of the Chinese OEMs are here, some of the Chinese OEMs are here. So I think all of the EV cars are supported by the very, very large data. And they incorporate like AI driving, self-voice activations, and self-driving assistance. So all of that, and also based on the large electricities in China. So China produced the world 1/3 of the global electricity output. So these things, and for South Africa, we're just talking about load shedding still. So how are we able to elevate about current or existing resources? That is a very critical important. And especially for the renewable energy side and the solar energy side, wind generating, I think this is South Africa, we need to start it first in able to catch up this EV journey, because that is actually critically important for us.
What I like the most about what you're saying is perhaps this is not just about the metal itself. The journey to electrification of fleets is perhaps the digital disruption. And it's about us getting the data that we need, understanding that data so we can apply these technologies in ways that are useful for us and that provide values for us. So with that being said, Kyle, maybe looking at a broader sustainability view, maybe what risks does South Africa face by switching either too quickly or too slowly to sustainable mobility? And what should some of our clients keep in mind as they try and toggle between the two? Should I move now or should I wait? What risks do they face and what should they consider?
Yes, if we again take the country view, this global transition is happening with or without us. So effectively with Europe, removing internal combustion engines by 2035, and export market being a component of our.
Can I give him my mic, please?
Yeah, so I'll actually maybe just kick off again. So effectively, I think South Africa forms part of this global movement, as I said in the first kind of question, and realizing that our export market for vehicles is about to be disrupted. If we look at Europe's rapid move to kind of banning internal combustion engines by 2035. So if we look at that view and realize that our automotive manufacturing sector needs to adapt very, very rapidly, and that entire supply chain needs to accommodate that transition, I think that is obviously the risk of moving too slowly. I think as we see South Africa move, the infrastructure requirements and the dependence on the grid that eMobility brings is an extensive, and Ntseoane quoted some of the numbers, that's a significant impact on infrastructure. So those are at a kind of high level, I think, the country risks of moving too slowly or moving too fast. But I think as businesses, that risk kind of translates in the sense that eMobility and actually sustainability as a topic for many of our clients is not really core to their businesses. We're very good at our core businesses, and eMobility or renewable energy, if you're installing small-scale embedded generation at your premises, that's not typically what your management team is set up to run. And these eMobility fleets, in our interaction with industry, it's quite clear that these are quite specialized. So you've got to think through, I think, particularly on, if you're moving too slowly, you lose that competitive edge and operational efficiency. But if you move too quickly and you're kind of almost ahead of the tech curve, that also adds its own kind of investment obligation and challenge that you then need to think about. So I think we always are keen to recommend the thought around actually breaking this down into a strategic approach. So I don't think it helps to bury your head in the sand and say, listen, let's wait and see what happens. I don't think that is certainly not what we're trying to do at FirstRand and FNB with our own journey, which I think we'll chat a little bit about later. But it's actually about how do we translate that into a strategy that makes sense, and think through kind of aspects like route management, the infrastructure around charging, the data requirements, and actually getting ahead of that curve. And I think the approach followed by many logistics companies that we started seeing, the likes of Bakers and others, is actually about just piloting, getting into this journey early and making sure that you're, I think, in front of this, but not so far in front that you're front running. So it's a delicate balance, but I think if you break it down to a strategy and you think through this clearly as a management team and as a client that's running a fleet, it's the right approach and should be combined with other sustainability activities.
Thanks for that, Carl. I think perhaps another important thing is knowing that you don't need to go the journey alone. There is an ecosystem of partners that you can work with as you transition. And maybe, Carl, I'll stay with you, and maybe let's just unpack how FirstRand as an entity, as you're saying now, has started moving. In as much as we are offering services to help you with your transition, and we're working with a lot of our partners, we've started the transition for ourselves. So what does that look like for FirstRand, and what are some of the things that we are doing or are planning to do, and the approaches that might help our clients on the floor?
Yeah, so I think our own journey is an interesting one, just to reflect on, in the sense that we're actually a client of ourselves in a certain kind of way. So we are covered, we've made some obligations to the market as a listed entity. The one that really impacts us, that's kind of front and center, is we've got a net zero ambition for our own operations by 2030. That is something we've put out to market, and it's a large focus of what we do. Admittedly, our fleet obligations is actually quite limited in the sense, it's really deliveries of cards and cash, etc., as you can effectively imagine. But we actually consume a significant amount of electricity in the sense that we've got data centers, we've got campus buildings, we've got office buildings, etc., that drive kind of our needs. We've also realized, I think, in our journey that sustainability isn't necessarily core to what we of our own operations in the sense. So we've had to actually adopt our frontline skills that we actually possess already, and the same advisory skills that we can provide our clients to actually drive these solutions kind of going forward. So some of the highlights that we kind of bring forward is some of our campus buildings already have embedded generation. We're actually progressing on upgrading that embedded generation using an off-balance sheet product that we've developed in FNB called FNB Energy Solutions, where we effectively sell electricity to the bank. So that's one of the projects that's going ahead. There's numerous other projects that are also going ahead on that basis. We're also actually embarking on wheeling as a mechanism to procure renewable energy at a reduced cost through the Energy Exchange of South Africa. That's a partner within FNB Energy Solutions. So these solutions are available to our clients kind of today. Then just on this EV transition and eMobility, we're already working with our teams on both from a cash perspective as well as practically courier companies on car deliveries to actually utilize last mile delivery and EVs in the last mile to reduce the carbon footprint and to deliver cards in a more effective way.
And that's exciting, and I've seen some of that work happen with our internal teams already starting to transition into electric fleets, or now doing a lot more work to see how it's going to work for us as a business as well. Greg, beyond electrical vehicles, what are some of the other sustainable mobility technologies that are out there, and how do they compare with new energy vehicles in the sense that we know it? So that is your plug-in hybrids, your pure battery electrical vehicles, and your mild hybrids as well. What technology is there, and how does it fare against those?
So, Linda, I think there's a misnomer in the industry to think of other sustainable mobility technologies competing with electric vehicles. I think the horse is bolted, to use that term, in the sense that the electric motor is going to be what drives propulsion, whether it's in a passenger vehicle, a truck, or in a micro-mobility scenario. But it's the battery storage component to that is going to be continuously evolving. So right now we're sitting with battery electric vehicles, which is the energy is stored in a lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt battery. And in future, we're going to see evolutions of the battery technology going to LFP. The council mentioned solid state. Those are all battery technologies that are coming. We're seeing the fastest technological change curve in battery chemistry is happening right now, driven largely by companies like BYD, CATL, Panasonic, and others. So the battery electric vehicles here to stay. But then you might find applications and use cases, for example, for a hydrogen type of scenario with a large trucking fleet that might look at a fuel cell scenario. But ultimately, that's still an electric vehicle. It's not different. There's other types of mobility that's evolving there as well. So it's all about understanding that you can decouple the energy storage component from the propulsion component when it comes to sustainable mobility.
Thank you for that. And again, that speaks to understanding the right application. So using the right technology for the right application. And that goes back to understanding your fleet, understanding your needs, and leaning in on experts who can help you gain that understanding for yourselves. There's been a lot of discussion around what this move to new energy vehicles is going to look like for South Africa. And obviously there will be some changes in the way that we operate. Sandile, how can we, as the participants in this industry, ensure that, I guess, the transition is inclusive, that we don't lose the elements of shared prosperity that Khanti spoke about earlier?
Yeah, thank you very much, Linda. I think it's an acceptable fact that the high upfront cost to EV investment is a concern, which also just creates that skepticism. But I think the involvement of government will go a long way to ensure that inclusivity as well, and make sure that at least even the supply chain does involve a whole lot of other players, and perhaps we bring it closer. The companies like, is it Gear? That's right, yeah, Car Gear, yeah, I think I was talking to him just now. I think if we bring these closer, it also just helps us that at least the manufacturing takes place locally, and it involves a whole lot of other players. I think that's basically just one way. And the current green paper does talk to that to a very large extent. And I think until such time it's adopted and signed off and executed, one should see that change, that positive change that will ensure that inclusivity. I think, yeah.
Thank you for that. And I think some of the things we can do now as we prepare for ourselves as entities is educate ourselves, is educate not only the leadership team that is driving the charge, but across the business. Do our staff understand what the transition to sustainable mobility looks like? When they are looking at operational items, do they understand how they're going to leverage the savings from the technology? And for us is, do we know how to best advise clients? And I think we've gone a long way to be able to do that and show clients that with the right application, this technology is for them. And maybe Lisa, just before we close off, what are some of the potential benefits that we are going to start seeing coming through our partnerships with our various stakeholders in China, and what can we look forward to? I know you were in Shanghai earlier on in the year for the Shanghai Auto Show. What are some of the exciting things that we saw there, and what can we look forward to coming to our end that we can leverage on even more?
Yeah, I think it's quite a lot of things, and we can share with you, and a lot of exciting part. And from China's side, just now everybody talking about the batteries and massive productions. So I want to share the good news with you, because at FNB Commercial, and we're working very, very closely with some of the Chinese OEMs. So currently they are in this feasibility study stage by setting up the factories here in South Africa. I think that is a good starting point and a learning curve for South African economy and about the EV technologies, EV cars. So I think that is going to be good for South African and also for the job creation part. So for that, and it's going to solve some of your questions in your mind, and especially for the production. So now in China, so electronic vehicles is very easy to set up the plant, because basically they're just a few components and plus the technologies and the batteries. So I think for that, and China is very good at it. And if they bring the technologies and do the technology know-how transfers, I think they will be going to the leap forward and for South Africa for coming into the EV cars technologies. And also from the Shanghai Motor Show, and I think have to be seeing as believing. So some of the people in this audience have been to China together with me, and to see the ever change of the Chinese automobile industries. So every day, every month, they're developing the different new things. So attracting the peoples and to changing their driving habit. So I think that one of the most exciting part with the driving vehicles is not really like our traditional, you think you're driving. Driving in China is a kind of the luxuries. Because of if you drive in the car, I'm talking about the data before. So you can sit in the car, you just give your car a comment to say where you want to go. And it's just a voice activation. Then the car just drive for you. So a lot of the people sitting in the car, they can even watch the movies. So that is the journey we are currently looking forward and going to be duplicated that kind of things in South Africa soon.
Thank you for that, Lisa, and thank you all, panelists. And maybe before we close, I'd like each of you just to maybe give us a little closing remarks about what does this journey mean for you, and what are you most excited to see?
Yeah, so thank you, Linda. I think for us as a finance institution, it's about, I think, how do we do more in this space? It's not just about making capital available. I think that we've already done, but it's how do we think a little bit differently about that capital? How do we use alternative funding structures like we've done in the renewable energy space, like we've done in this leasing space with FML, and make it applicable to this technology? And then it's about how do we work together with partners, the government being one of them, the charging infrastructure, the development funding institutions, to make this accessible to the market. So I think our work is cut out for us, but we're excited on the journey, and we're excited to partner with our clients and learn from our clients' experience as we also go through our own learnings in this space.
Thank you for that, Kyle. Greg?
Yeah, thanks, Linda. I think for me, I've been through a bit of a personal journey on this as well. I can say I've crossed over to the other side in the sense that I am an EV driver. I have been driving an EV for about a year and a half. Prior to that, I was actually a hybrid driver for a year and a half. So I've kind of taken, I would guess, the 2 steps that many people are thinking about taking. And let's not forget, if the growing number of hybrids that are being sold, and now the plug-in hybrids are coming as well, is going to be the first exposure for many people to be able to drive an EV mode and experience the silence, and to some degree also experience the performance boost that you get with an EV, which for me is one of the most exciting aspects of this technology, is that it's just an incredible experience to drive these cars. So I hope that, by crossing over, you can, and many more people will start to do so. People will start to recognize that it's possible. They will start to see more and more charging stations appearing on the N3, on the N1, on the N2. They'll start to see charging stations appearing at shopping centers and at corporate parks, at your enterprise clients. They'll see them at fleet operators. They'll see more and more delivery vans coming that are EV. And that'll start to turn the tide, hopefully, in people's minds, that this is a reality. It's not something in the future. It's happening here today, and I might as well get onto it.
Thank you for that. Sandile?
Yeah, thanks, Linda. I'd like to just take a very realistic view. I mean, in our industry, for instance, costs matter. I did speak about the whole fleet procurement, the importance of costs in investing in EVs. I don't know, the industry just generally needs to look at that, because that will also just drive that increase, that perceived increase. But secondly, I think we, as a nation, as an industry, we need to drive it. This is not something new. I mean, if you think about it, our industrial sites, our factories, most of them have got these units in forklifts that have been operating for years on batteries. So it's nothing new. But I think we have to drive education as well, just to change the mindset. For instance, so that we eliminate the skepticism that we're seeing in our industry in terms of just investing in that. I made an example, for instance, I think it was last night when we spoke about this, some of the real, experiences that our industries have gone through, for instance, where, because of lack of education, a client would take a vehicle and expect to reach Durban when there is a range, you know what I mean? So little things like those tend to impact on people's, preparedness to invest in this, because one, it creates a lot of money. You've got to invest a lot of money to go and fetch that vehicle when a client calls you. But I think, to sum it up, education is very important. The cost of basically manufacturing the unit itself, we've got to look at that. I think it will, in a way, help in making sure that at least we increase our investment in that area.
Thank you for that, Sandile. I think education is basically what today is about. And seeing the new vehicles coming in, I think once everybody gets an opportunity to see what's available in the market, some of those concerns around costs will subside a bit, because there are some models that are quite affordable out there. So it's all about education. I'll hand over to you, Yahya.
So in an uncertain market, we need to bring certainty to it. And in my view, the way we bring certainty is through our partnerships. And that will, in essence, carve out the way in terms of our adoption for this product. So we almost want to revolutionize, but we need to evolve first.
Thank you for that. So speaking to, if we want to go fast, we go alone, but if we want to go far, we go together. And that's basically what this is about today. Then Lisa?
Okay. Coming to me, I think as the Chinese business ambassadors and acting between South Africa and China. So what I would like to see and I would like to bring is to bring the more Chinese investors, especially in the electronic vehicles, partners and OEMs, and into South Africa, and also try to establish the business here. So I think that is going to help in South Africa to shorten the distance about the learning, the EV electronic vehicles and also electronic industries, because everybody talking about electronic vehicles is actually a very, very cost charge and everything, but in realities, and in China, and we have a very, very good supply chain and can reduce the cost. I think by using that experience and also what we've learned, and also my network, and I think that one will bring South Africa and more closer to the Chinese EV cars.
Thank you. Thank you so much, panelists. We're going to take some time and look to you in our audience for any questions that you might have for our panelists before we let them go. So I think the team is ready with some roaming mics, and I'm happy to lend a mic where needed. But any question that the audience might have for our panelists, just to lean on their knowledge and their expertise. Thank you.
Any questions, guys? I'm late, so I didn't want to barge in with questions that might be answered by Ufifi, probably. I know we talk about the evolution. I mean, this is a journey that we've been on. My name is Shiny Kobieza from NAMSA, the Automotive Business Council. One of the biggest journeys that we are trying to win with South Africa is mobility inclusion. And mobility inclusion also means that the elephant in the room, most South Africans do not qualify to buy any kind of car. If we are going to create solutions in South Africa that calls to EV adoption, do we have, and I'm calling on my partners whose logos are on the screen, do we have solutions that we've created that speaks to an entrepreneur who needs to replace their fleet, and maybe we look at that as an opportunity for adoption? Are we looking at normal consumers that buy expensive vehicles, but we show them how financial inclusion will make it cheaper for them to actually buy EVs? The perception that EVs are expensive is there, and the truth is the total cost of ownership with EV is actually cheaper. But do we have maybe those solutions or opportunities around education that we're talking about, that us as partners we can collaborate and bring those solutions to forth? And anyone can take this question but Greg. Thank you.
No discrimination. Yes, I think the inclusion topic is an important one, and I think the only way you can look at it is at a total cost of ownership level. And so, unfortunately, South Africa isn't the front runner in this EV journey on the continent. We can look at Kenya as an example of what is enabled by eMobility and e-scooters, and the delivery market that has opened up in Kenya as an example. So to talk to your point of entrepreneurship, I think there is the case study that stands already in terms of total cost of ownership and an e-scooter that is made for Africa, by Africa, in that market. And there's some exciting developments kind of coming from that space. I think the other market that's worth kind of talking to is the minibus market, and I want to say the conversion of minibuses, and there's already work at the University of Stellenbosch in this space, where the minibus taxi conversion market is significant. I mean, in the multiple billions of rands opportunity, and based on effectively a 50 or 30% cost per kilometer on total cost of ownership, I mean that translates to real savings to people getting to work, etc. I think the third one, and this talks to, I think, us as financial institutions playing our part, is really about how do we enter into partnerships. And that's partnerships with development funding institutions, it's partnerships with our end clients that are operating fleets on a franchise basis, and developing things like owner-driver schemes. And how do we put vehicles in the hands of the entrepreneurs, the drivers that are doing the deliveries? And I think that's one part where we as a bank can play a significant role when we combine that with the right technology. And I think for once, all three of those components can actually come together, and we're already starting to make some inroads in that space and have some of the right conversations at that level.
like to maybe add, I think in the retail side, we are starting to see the range of vehicles that are coming in become more affordable. If you look at the range that has been available for some time, it's been vehicles that have been up of your 500,000 range. That is becoming a bit more affordable over time. And we already have solutions sitting in retail like the GFV, Guaranteed Future Value, that customers can leverage off of to get their first EV vehicle that will be in line with their needs, that will allow them to experience the vehicle and not be worried about what will the future value of this vehicle be and what will I do with this vehicle when it comes. So from a solutions perspective, as well as a product offering, it is slowly getting cheaper and the availability is getting better. We combine this with what Kyle has said around owner-driver schemes, around what micro-mobility will look like for South Africa. I think we'll slowly start to see that inclusion come in. Thank you for that question.
If I may add,
Yes,
Linda,
yes.
I'm just thinking now, I think it's a relevant question. Whilst it cannot be, we cannot certainly influence it, almost immediately on the rental side, but certainly on the leasing side. We could explore, in fact, this is something that strategically we're looking at, and with my colleague as well, sitting next to me here, that strategically we could look at, the grants that are going on around the world and how they've stimulated basically growth as well. The various tax, laws that are introduced to provide some sort of relief to employees as well. That in itself basically ensures some sort of inclusivity of sorts. I just thought I must throw that in because this is something that we are exploring to basically engage government in terms of the introduction of those grants and rebates, etc. Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh,
Thank
there's a few
you.
at the back as well.
Sorry?
No, I'm just letting the team know that there's a few at the back as well.
Okay, so thank you very much. My name is Junior. I work for WesBank Retail. First of all, I just want to say thank you. Thanks to you for creating such spaces for us to engage on this topic. Instead of us trying to solution for these things in our little corner, then we are meeting as a ecosystem players to then, one, raise concerns, ask questions, allay whatever apprehension that might be there, and also at the same time find solution, put our heads together, find solution, because through such questions that come through, it then challenge us as players to come with solutions. My then question is, can we then look forward to more of these spaces, more of these conversations? Because the reality is, the more you talk about a topic, you then normalize it. It becomes a second nature and everyone else becomes comfortable around the specific topic. Can we look forward to more of this? And what's the plan going forward? Thank you.
I think definitely. This for us is probably the start, but the idea is that the conversation is going to continue, and not just the conversations, but you'll also see an evolution of the solutions that we offer as well. I think what we pride ourselves in is making sure we understand our customers' context as an entity and making sure that our solutions meet our customers' context as well. So this conversation is going to be ongoing, and it will be a collaborative approach. Is as we understand more, as we do more in this space, what are the things that we can bring together that will allow us all to be successful? I don't know if anybody else wants to. I want to throw it at you, Greg.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think beyond just in a conference scenario or conference setting and talking about it, what we love to do, and there's a few colleagues in the room that have done this with me, we'd like to do this for real and take test drives and go for road trips and bring eMobility to people. I mean, there was a road trip we did last year with Ma'am Shani and Namsa and the colleagues where we did 2,300 kilometers in 5 EVs as a lead up to SA Auto Week. And every time we stopped at a charging station, the amount of people that would flock to the car to ask questions: how does this work? What's a kilowatt hour? What's the difference between that and a petrol car? How far can you go? How long does it take to drive? We love to engage and just bring this reality to the mass market out there. And there's so much interest in the technical ability of it and the fact that this is such a technologically driven transition we're living through. So I could just concur with Linda. We'd love to continue.
Good afternoon. So my name's Dex Machida. I'm from KPMG. I see some of the colleagues are smiling on the stage. You were expecting me to talk. So my question is to Sandile and Yahya, to yourselves. And I'd like to approach this from the perspective of fleet. So if we're talking about electric vehicles, I think stimulating demand is one of the things that we need to do in South Africa right now, because without that demand, we're not going to see the uptake accelerate. And I guess the question I'd like to pose to yourselves is, what are we doing about the business model within the fleet space in order to best utilize these assets to be able to, to stimulate that demand? And the thinking here is, unlike ICE vehicles, where, anything from, say, 30 to, say, 60,000 kilometers, you would utilize the asset, and then you would sell it on for the purposes of recouping on those investments. But if you look at it from an electric vehicles perspective, you're starting to see vehicles which are running 300,000, 500,000, even close to 1 million kilometers on a single vehicle, which basically means that there's an opportunity here to really look at the business model where instead of going through a single cycle, you could go through 3 to 5 cycles to sweat that asset. And that in turn could then help you guys from a fleet perspective, even from a financing perspective, to be able to provide better solutions out into the market, which can then become more attractive for both the consumers and the business. So if you've got maybe some thoughts around that, on how innovation on business models in relation to fleets are being tackled, we'd really like to hear around that. Thank you.
Okay. I didn't get the name. It's Dex, yeah. No, first of all, I think I did indicate that the numbers are so negligible at this stage that we don't even collect the data. What I shared with you, obviously, we deal a lot with Lightstone, as do most of the colleagues around here, are the numbers that I've shared. The whole defleeting, someone spoke about the second-hand market as well. You know how that impacts on our profitability. So it's very important. At this stage, I think these are some of the, this is some of the research that the various players are conducting themselves, which is why I think there's this skepticism. Because right now, it does impact on profitability in terms of fleet. But yes, if you look at the whole concept of total cost of ownership, we bring it into our calculations and research. One should see a change in mindset as well. But as it stands at the moment, we're defleeting, at least on average, every 30,000 to 40,000 kilometers. The large fleet owners obviously defleet at very young sort of stage. You're talking 20,000 kilometers. They move their fleet around. But that's not going to be the case. And coupled with perhaps if you look at the cost of damages that we incur as an industry, I mean, we're talking quite a few millions. And these are costs that we monitor pretty hard. But yes, I agree with you. Obviously, it goes with that mind change, obviously, but also over time, the industry itself is evolving. This is a wave that we cannot escape. Whilst the numbers are very negligible at this stage, but we should see that increase that will influence our procurement cycles as well, and the way our procurement strategies as well, which will then answer your question. But right now, I can't confidently with authority, knowing fully well that we don't even collect the data because of the limited fleet size within particularly the rental side. We also don't, we have not really collected any data. I think it's something that we need to start looking at on the leasing side, for instance. We do collect quite a bit of data, but not entirely focused on EV vehicles. So perhaps as part of helping this evolution, this is something that we need to look at as an industry to say, so that we can confidently, at least with authority, share how well we're doing in that area. I don't know if that answers you. Okay. Yeah.
If I can just add to that, just you're referring to the thinking around business models, and clearly it's not at advanced stage right now, but if we unpack the business models in utilizing a bundle service approach as well, which could almost be a catalyst to get the user to have confidence in the asset type. And when I refer to bundle services, it's how do we look at including the charging infrastructure, the insurance, certain maintenance or even service components, monitoring of the battery health, and how do we replace that battery, all as a bundle service and offering to the consumer to ultimately strengthen the confidence. In addition to that, some of the models that we're looking at also talks to how do we apply just the battery as a service and a subscription service just for battery, and separate that between your actual chassis and vehicle. So those models are definitely workable. We are in discussions with OEMs around how we actually deploy these models, and once we get comfort around it, we're happy to pilot and ultimately launch.
I think maybe to add, Dex, to that, I'll be brief so that we can move to the other questions, is there's still a lot of runway for leasing in South Africa. If you look at your average South African business or your consumer, a large part of the market buys their vehicle cash. So from a leasing perspective, in terms of you understanding your fleets, understanding where are you, is your fuel usage a bit high because there's a lot of idling, where your drivers are perhaps braking too harshly and not managing the vehicle adequately. As a fleet management and leasing solution, we offer end-to-end solutions that help you manage your fleet. And I think that's perhaps the catalyst of allowing you to move into an EV. If you don't understand where your savings are going to be, are you going to experience it as savings? Probably not. But when you first start with understanding what is the composition of my fleet, is my fleet at its most efficient levels right now, then the move to electrical vehicles start to make sense. Then the savings are savings that are tangible and palatable because you are operating from an efficient step. So first step, I think, is getting to a fleet management and leasing offering. I'm not being biased, but I am, to allow you to understand what your fleet composition is and how do you get the most effective savings through using technologies such as eMobility. So I'm going to hand over. I think there was another question somewhere at the back. Yes, sir, I see you. I don't know if there's a mic that side. If you don't mind standing, sir, so that they can see you. Okay, awesome.
I don't know if I got any taller standing, but anyway. Good afternoon, panel. My name's Alex Staniland. I am from a company called Special Envoy Express, and I'm representing Dongfeng today. I sit in a unique position where I am a consumer and involved in Dongfeng on a dealership level. And of recent, I implemented a very first EV courier service into my company. And I sat with challenges during finance, not on just a business level, but on a consumer level, where affordability is a challenge on these vehicles. They are more expensive than your normal ICE vehicles. What mechanisms has WesBank put in place to recognize that affordability? I don't think people realize they can afford these vehicles because they are 200,000-300,000 Rand more than an ICE vehicle. So where does the bank educate the consumer to show them that they can educate it? Because quite frankly, when I went through the process with an opposition bank, I had to educate them on an affordability where I'm saving on fuel, which makes it more affordable for me to buy a more expensive vehicle. So where is WesBank on that, where they can educate the public to show them that they can afford a more expensive vehicle? Do you take any mechanism of taking that fuel saving into account during the affordability, for example?
I'll take the first step. I think a lot of the work that has happened, and some of you will see on the WesBank Instagram pages and social media pages, a lot of the conversation we're having is around understanding the total cost of ownership of your assets. Coming from the leasing fraternity, it's perhaps core to our business. When we lease out a vehicle to you, the most important thing that we'll show you is what is the total cost of ownership for you earning asset A versus asset B. And there's already been work that has happened in Kaval space around making sure that the elements around the electrical EVs are coming into our total cost of ownership calculations. So we show customers where you're going to get your carbon credits, what's your fuel savings going to be like, and how does that help you from an affordability perspective. Some of the innovations that we're still working on, and Kaval, I'll share on your behalf, is how do we leverage e-bucks to further enhance that affordability. That's still in the works, but there's a lot happening in our space that helps clients understand what is the total cost of me owning this asset and how do I leverage that to improve my affordability. I'll hand over to anybody else who wants to.
Yeah, Linda, so I think you've covered most of it. But additionally, to your point, what we're building at the moment, it's not out yet, is also exactly the calculator that the person who asked the question was referring to actually visualize that total cost of ownership to the customer of an EV versus of a ICE vehicle. Whilst the top line, which is your cash price, might be higher, what then the actual total cost looks like. But that's obviously in the build stage at this point in time, and that will be coupled, to your point, through the enabled through the consumer education as we start again to start talking about this thing, start asking questions, start answering some of the questions, and just making this narrative a lot more normal, acceptable, and I suppose normalize this whole journey.
Hi, my name's Ruben from Business Fleet Africa. You guys are speaking a lot about total cost of ownership, but I think a big portion of that is the offloading costs of the vehicle. And where are you getting data on how much it costs to offload these vehicles once the lease has run its course, given that there's so few of these vehicles being sold, and what is the appetite in the used market for those vehicles? I think, like Sandile says, these big fleets have mechanisms in place to offload their vehicles, and they know I can run a Toyota for 30,000 Ks and it's going to cost X at the end of that. Where is that in your sum, and where are you getting that data? And it might cost the customer so much to run the car for 3 years, but at some point somebody's going to have to pay for that deficit of it being an expensive car to buy, and then there's a big gap between how much it can be offloaded for.
Yeah, absolutely, great question, and I guess that's the uncertainty in everybody's mind right now. The ability for us to try and manage the resale values currently is also pegged on data that we receive and consume from our OEMs that have these vehicles in your more mature countries. So we almost utilize that data, we try to model it into our environment, and we work on levels of probability around sale. But that's where it's important, I guess, for us that there's no sole entity that will take the risk or the loss of the asset. We're wanting to ensure that through our partnerships with the OEM and the battery suppliers, that there's a thorough understanding of the moving parts, the uncertain parts, and as we get a lot more comfortable with the data, with the use of the assets, as we progress year on year, the more data we accumulate, the more confident it'll enable us to then shape better models around the resale values of these assets.
Carl. I think there's a critical data point that we must keep in mind. It's the state of health of the battery, the SOH of the battery. We're seeing, as was alluded to by Dex earlier, cars are now doing 300,000 to 500,000 kilometers, and the state of health of the battery after that is still between 85% to 90%. That's still a very usable capacity for that vehicle to have a second cycle, third cycle of life. And so I think the likes of a TransUnion and a Lightstone and others need to work in conjunction with WesBank to see how do we apply that data point to the valuation of a second-hand car. The We Buy Cars models that are now doing automated valuations also need to consider this in terms of what is the actual market for that second-hand vehicle. Because in many respects, some EVs are holding their value, whereas the premium EVs that were sold, well over 2 million rand have dropped a lot of value. But that's really just got to do with normal market dynamics, not so much the technologies.
I see that as it's a question of time. I don't know at what point we're going to reach what Lisa, took us through where China is. But it did take them 30 years. And it is definitely a challenge, and I agree with Ruben that this is one of the challenges of fleet owners, when they defleet their vehicles, the resale value of the vehicles. So certainly I think these are some of the studies I was referring to when I say it's going to take some sort of research, making those calculations, including with some of our partners, Yahya, WesBank, and others are part of us as an industry as well. And in my assessment, it's going to take a bit of time. It may not just happen immediately, but certainly it will take a bit of time as well as we evolve and increase the numbers. Yeah.
Yep, I'm alive. Thank you very much. My name is William from your newest and most exciting podcast in South Africa called What's on Wheels, which is an interesting thing considering that actually I'm a horse trader, like my father before him and my grandfather before him and so forth and so on. And the only lesson horse trainers really need to learn is a very simple one. Put the horse in the right place. In South Africa, we have around about 5,000 EVs in total in our fleet, and we have about 13 million cars on the road at the moment. We sold about 1,200 EVs last year. Not sure what we set to push on this year. And in total, our NEV sales, total fleet, which includes hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and so forth, is under 30,000 vehicles. That's over the last 5 years. EVs, about 0.003% of total EVs on the road. So we've sold all the vehicles, battery electric vehicles, to all the early adopters. We've satiated that market. What's coming next? And my question is, yes, we're seeing EVs coming down in price. We're seeing the first sub 500,000 Rand passenger vehicles on the road. Is that enough? And you guys who work on these big data sets, where is the inflection point where we actually have meaningful data to go on, that EVs are establishing a foothold in the South African market, that we have traction, and that we can predict with certainty what the future trends in EV sales are going to look like? Because come 2035, when our OEMs are no longer able to export their ICE vehicles to Europe, is our market going to be big enough locally to take up the EVs that hopefully, if they survive that long, the OEMs are going to be making?
Yeah, maybe just to take a first step. Thanks, William. I think you're right, that inflection point is critical. What I've seen around the world is that that inflection point sits at 5% of vehicle sales. So once EVs hit the 5% mark, it's the beginning of the S-curve of growth. Like you say, we are in the fractions of a percent, so roughly below 1%, but it's that 5% mark we need to shoot towards. And that roughly means we need to be selling around 2,000 EVs a month. 24, 25,000 cars a year. When we hit that mark, we should be well on our way.
Thank you for that, Greg. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the awesome questions. And thank you to our panelists for being with us today. I think Lisa mentioned it, a few of our panel members mentioned it, sometimes seeing is believing. And to support getting us closer to that 5% point is and allow yourself to spend some time with the vehicles, to go to the track and drive the vehicle a bit. I think for me as well, I'm perhaps a few steps behind Greg, where I'm only now, as I interact more with electrical vehicles, considering my next car being an EV, considering what my energy solutions are going to look like at home. But that is because I've had the opportunity to experience these vehicles and experience the values that they provide to me personally as an individual. So thank you again for all of you being here, and look forward to enjoying the rest of the day with you. Thank you.